Well, guys, thank you for letting me be with you this morning. Um, Again, we're walking through a series on healing of the fractured soul, and we're looking at the consequences of woundedness to a person's life. And we went through yesterday some of the consequences that have to do with basically the consequences to our identity. And so today we're going to follow up with another major consequence because of woundedness, uh, which is what I call a typical life rejection cycle. So I'll explain this. It's not that any particular person couldn't have little differences here or there, but what I'll share with you is in general, it applies to most people and hopefully will help bring sense and understanding to a person's life, again, to bring them freedom in the Lord. So as I walk through this rejection cycle, I'll just kind of put the points up like that because I'm not writing on a board or something. So basically, in this rejection cycle, pretty much a common, typical life cycle. So if we start at the top of the page, you can just put rejection cycle, and then the first step in it, of course, would be a child. Okay, a child is born into the world. And really, for the most part, because of what we shared yesterday, you now have learned and understand that when God made us in his image, in their likeness, the Godhead, that gave us three critical elements, three critical areas that our heart longs for, because God wants to be the ultimate fulfillment to them. And those three areas are a longing to be loved, a longing to be accepted, a longing to be secure. And so here comes a little child in our rejection cycle. First step, child is born into the world, a family, good, bad, or ugly family. But the heart of that little child is still longing for what God put in it. Even though the child doesn't know, God put it in there. Now, here comes the problem. Not everybody is born into a perfect family. Okay, it's pretty rare. Even if you've got good moms and dads, things are going to happen. Well, what are those things? Well, negative events of hurts and wounds will happen. Most time, these are going to come through moms, dads, teachers, pastors, employee bosses. Well, guess who these people are? For the most part, they're what we call authority figures. Now, simple question. How many of you in your life have ever struggled with an authority figure? So when I ask that question in a classroom, I mean, it's 100% response every time. Well, guys, I'm not saying that the authority figure was not good, but I can tell you another reason why you struggled so much with authority figures, not just growing up, but even to this day. The bottom line is you are unconsciously longing for the authority figures' love, acceptance, and security, and you don't even know it. You're looking for an authority figure to feel what God put in your heart that only he can really truly fulfill. And so that creates an incredible, not healthy relationship. And it doesn't end with authority figures. It can flow over to your friends. It can flow over to a girlfriend, a boyfriend. It can flow over into husband and wife. You're still unconsciously looking for what God put in your heart. So this begins the cycle of rejection because you've been rejected by moms, dads, authority figures, pastors, bosses. I mean, the list is incredible. So let's throw God into the mix. So, well, where does God fit in here? Well, God is the big authority figure. Wow. It's no wonder so many Christians struggle with God relationally and God's love because he's the biggest authority figure ever. And they have had no success with authority figures. They're afraid. They're afraid of rejection. So guys, this begins to create as the little child grows up. I hope this is making sense. You can kind of fill in your own blanks in spare time. But as the little child begins to grow up, saying now into teenage years, two other very typical, let's say, consequences come forth in this rejection cycle. Well, what are those? Well, because of this constant pattern of looking for love and acceptance, so to speak, in authority figures and others, and not getting it, or you get it, but it's not real. Okay, I'm not saying you don't ever get it from authority figure. You get it, but it doesn't last. Something happens, relationships are broken. That's just the cycle of everybody on earth over and over. It doesn't matter what culture. So now, as a young teenager, this person begins to develop two things. One is insecurities, personal insecurities. Secondly, along with insecurities are going to come fears, various and sundry emotional fears. Now, the person is not secure, so obviously they're not going to walk around school and to their friends and just say, oh, hey, I just want you to know I'm very insecure. Ain't nobody going to do that. Oh, I just want you to know I'm insecure and full of fear. No. So what are they going to do? How are they going? They're going to cover it up because they don't want anybody to know. If anybody knows, that's only going to raise the risk of more rejection. Exactly. So let's cover this thing up. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, there's only two ways. So basically now in this cycle, we enter a life of cover up. And there's only two ways. There's what I call a withdrawal, and I will explain these, a withdrawal form of cover up, and there's an outward form of cover up. So I want you to imagine a pendulum. Okay, so you've got a pendulum here that swings back and forth, just like in a clock. Okay, just like a clock. Well, you really will swing from an outward form of cover up to an inner or withdrawal form of cover up, all depending on the social setting. Let me explain. So I will now use my life to explain this to you. Okay, because hey, this cycle was me, all right? That the Lord gave me all of this. This was me. All right. So let's take first of all, my outward form of cover up, because I want each one of you to be able to write down your main outward form of cover up. Because to slay the dragon, you got to figure out where to shoot the arrow. Okay. You just can't shoot bullets to the sky. If we're going to kill the dragon, you got to point the gun, shoot it. Okay. Hit the target. So to do that, you got to know What is my own outward forms of cover up? Am I really using? So, guys, I can tell you right now, generally speaking, your outward form of cover up is going to be whatever realm socially, whatever realm you found wonderful acceptance in. Okay, let me repeat that. Your outward form of cover up is going to be social, whatever social activity, whatever realm that you found success in, because finding success in that realm gave you a, let's say, not true, false level of love, acceptance, and security, which is why you continue to perform in it. So for me, it was sports. So was I good at sports? Yeah, I had a whole wall full of trophies. Okay. All right. Here's what happens. Somebody watches me play ball, whatever. I played them all. And they'd say, oh boy, I wish I was like him. He is so secure. Look at what he can do. Just because you can do something good does not equate you're secure. I was as insecure as anybody on 2 feet. All they're doing is seeing me perform in my outward form of cover up. Is this beginning to make sense now? We've all got outward forms. You could be good at music. You could be good at science. You could be good at chemistry. You could be good at humor. But I promise you, your outward form of cover up is basically going to be whatever you are good at and get some sense of positive affirmation from others in your life. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that you're secure. So guys, you want to see and recognize what you're doing, why you're doing, and all of this is geared to get you into a place of freedom in the love and acceptance and security of God. So then out of that security, you can continue to be blessed with the gifts he's given you rather than walking in them for insecure purposes. I hope this makes sense. All right, so that's the outward form. Now, socially, we also have a withdrawal form of cover up. All right, so I want you to also be able to identify your withdrawal form. Well, what is that? That's going to be where any social setting is a threat to you. Let me just give you a couple examples. I'll give you one out of my life, but I'm thinking now of what people have told me. Because when I would mention sports, I've had a number of people say, "Oh, I hated gym class." Okay, they would say that was my worst. I hated gym class in school. I was so terrible at it. I couldn't do. That's the point. Well, if that's, you would avoid it at all costs. Why is that? Because it exposes weaknesses. If it exposes weaknesses, I'm going to get continued rejection. So you're not going to volunteer for stuff you're no good at. So with me, now, hey, this was me. I was not, okay, actually another strength of somebody, an outward form of cover up is what we could call social, let's say social animal. In other words, an outward form of cover up for some of you guys, because you are social animals. You thrive in social settings. You just can't get enough social interaction, being with people all the time. Now, I'm not talking here about sin or wickedness, going to parties, having fun. You're a social animal. And you thrive on it. That would be an outward form of cover. Now, for me, I was just the opposite. Social settings like that, like parties, and social gatherings where you had to actually interact with people one-on-one, man, I avoided that at all costs, at all costs. I would not go. Being athletic, I would always get invited to the parties, but I mean, I would lie, cheat, rob, or steal, whatever I had to do to get out of it, because I would be exposed. My weaknesses, I was like a duck out of water, truly. I'm very uncomfortable. I did not like that setting. I didn't know what to say to people. Very, very uncomfortable. So I'm just telling you to my life. I want you to write down your life. Okay. So I want everybody to know what are your withdrawal forms of cover up, which is going to be what social settings do I really not like, because you're going to risk rejection. And then you have your outward form, which is, hey, I love this. Well, that's because you're getting attention. You're getting the accolades of people. Oh, you're so good, but none of it equates that you're secure or free. So that now in this rejection cycle, now you're becoming a young adult, and this is going to lead to a lifelong search, lifelong. Unless you come to revelation and truth in God, you will search for the rest of your living days, married, single, until you get to be 100 years old. You will search, even unconsciously, for ways of gaining three things: love, acceptance, and security, because that's what God put in your heart, because he wants to be the fulfillment to it. Now comes the next step, which is basically, okay, throughout my life, because of this lifelong search in all the wrong places, unhealthy habit patterns are going to begin to develop. Unhealthy habit character patterns, unrealistic, poor self images begin to develop. Guys, this is why, again, everybody in the class, if I said, hey, how many of you struggle with self-worth, self-esteem, all of this identity, everybody raises their hand. This is why. Let me give you just what I consider the two most major unhealthy character traits that come out of this cycle. And I'll explain them. The first is a life of independence. A life of independence. Now, somebody might say, oh boy, that's not me, because I'm so shy and I'm so compliant and I'm just a, very submitted, humble little person. Don't give me that. Okay, let me explain to you what a life of independence. Here's the deal. Since the time you were able to do this, if somebody hurts you, what do you do to them? Generally speaking, you cut them off, cut them out. Yeah, I'm not going to keep having a relationship with somebody that hurts me. I cut them off. All right, what about the next authority figure there? Cut them off. Well, what about this girl? Cut her off. What about my boy? Cut him off. So all of a sudden, you're now 5, 10, 15, 20 years old, 25, 30, 35, 40. And guess what you've done all of your life? Every time somebody rejects you, all you do is cut them out. Cut, 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 cut. All right, so who's left? You. That's a life of independence. In other words, bottom line, my dear people, if you want to be bold, open, and honest, you ain't trusting nobody but you. And a lot of people even struggle with that. You become the regulating, controlling factor of your life. Now we got a problem, because you're supposed to be a Christian. Okay. What does that mean? Well, that's supposed to mean that if I'm a Christian, I'm actually supposed to trust God and be submitted to him. Well, here comes the reality. All right, because you have cut everybody out, you only trust yourself. Now let's make it applicable to the Lord. Bottom line, most Christians are not 100% totally surrendered to the Lord because of everything I just explained to you. So what does that mean, Steve? It means they hold the regulating, controlling factor of their life. They hold it in the palm of their hand. What does that mean? Even at best, again, totally unconsciously, they give God 49% of the vote, which means I've got 51%. And that's how most people go to church. So if God says, hey, would you be a missionary and go to Africa? No. I got 51% of the vote, God, in case you didn't know. Okay, I appreciate what you're saying, Lord, but hey, I got 51%. Buck stops with me. That is exactly, I promise you, how most Christians live. They don't really trust God. They're going to keep the final vote in their hand, and yet they'll go to church and sing the songs, I surrender all. It's pitiful. They ain't surrendered all whatsoever. So guys, to be set free, you've got to come to grips with this stuff. You mean, Steve, I've actually got to surrender 100%? 100%. That's it. God's not going to settle for anything less ever, ever, ever than 100% surrender. To do that, you've got to actually trust him. And it cannot be intellectual. It's got to be heart. Yeah, but what if God asked me to really be a missionary to the Philippines? Oh, my stars. Okay. Second major character issue that you've got to deal with is fear of commitment. This doesn't mean you don't behave like a committed person. What I'm talking about here is over time, a person receives hurts and wounds out of their committed relationship with their authority people and or with their friends. And over time, again, this is not conscious to us. Over time, all of these hurts, it begins to make sense. You know what? Seems like the more I get committed to people, the more I get hurt. Maybe I should be a lot more careful about my commitment levels. And that's what Christians do. So what we do is we become what we call controlled commitment. But again, this is all not conscious. You become controlled, committed person, which means I'm only going to commit to the level I can actually handle. Because I'm sick and tired of being hurt. And every time I commit, I get hurt. Every time I commit, I get hurt. Why do you think, hey guys, listen, the divorce rate amongst Christians is 50%. Talk about commitment and hurt. It's unbelievably sad. And yet they're taking vows before God to love each other what? To the death for better or for worse. And it doesn't even last half the time. And it's a vow before God. Guys, I'm telling you, this stuff is real. And you can have some of the sweetest Christian missionaries on the face of God's green earth, but that does not mean they are secure people functioning in the love of God, secure enough to truly be committed to whatever the cause God has called them to under authority. No. So guys, most Christians will be very, very careful. I don't care if it's YWAM. I don't care if it's church. I don't care if it's IHOP. It makes no never mind. They are going to be very, very careful about their level of commitment, even though they're not going to show it. They're going to show commitment. But trust me, it's going to be a very controlled commitment. The problem is people want relationships without commitment, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with God or any other which way. So I want you to think very seriously about those two character issues. All right? Because they are very, very typical, and they will keep you in bondage. I mean, till the day you die. Now, out of this, I want to read you a couple of verses in 2 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 10. And then we're going to walk you through, because these verses are normally considered, and I'm not trying to be contradictory, but normally what I'm going to read you are considered intercessory verses. All right, but I want to give you a little bit different twist on these. This is 2 Corinthians 10, 4 through 6. For the weapons of our warfare are not physical, but they are powerful with God's help for the tearing down of fortresses. So that's why a lot of people refer to these as intercessory verses, okay? But I want you to notice something here. The weapons of our warfare are not physical. Okay. They are powerful with God's help for the tearing down of fortresses, inasmuch as we tear down reasonings and every proud barrier that's raised up against the knowledge of God. Guys, whatever's being talked about here, God calls something, which we're going to identify, but God says, okay, here we got a problem. Something in your life, he's calling a fortress. That's a pretty powerful word. Well, not only that, he's also calling it a reasoning. Okay, not a good reasoning. And he's also calling this thing a proud barrier. Goodness me, this is not good. What is this thing? Well, right here it is. What has been raised up against the knowledge of God and lead every thought to subjection to Jesus. You mean to tell me that God is calling a simple thought a fortress? A proud barrier and reasoning? Yes, it says it right there. We have thoughts that are not God's. We have actually thought things about ourselves that are not God. That he is calling a fortress in your life, a proud barrier in your life, and a proud reason. So guys, now I want to walk you through a quick exercise, because listen, this whole week is just about walking you from one level of freedom to the next, to where we finally see you free, where you can actually go forth as a healed, whole agent of God and bring healing and wholeness to other people, because the truth will set them free. Now, what we got to do here is set you free, believe it or not, from thoughts that you thought about yourself since childhood. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a suggested list. And then later on, you can come up with your own. But guys, this is serious stuff. This is not just, oh, that's a thought. We just went over the seriousness of thinking thoughts about yourself that God did not say. That is bondage. It's a fortress. Okay, here are some typical people thoughts. I am not smart. Now, I'm going to give you about 5 or 6, but I want you to write down those that you then have really think about yourself. I am not smart. I am not pretty, or I'm not handsome. I'm not attractive. Golly, I have no gifts. I have no talents. I am inferior. God can't really use me like he uses others. People don't really like me. I'm a failure. Now, that's just a hypothetical list. Okay, you need to be very specific. You need to write down specifically the thoughts that you have believed about yourself all of your life right up till now. To be open and honest with you, the number one thing I had thought about myself when God exposed this to me was I'm a failure. And yet I was in missions, seeing God move, doing things. That's got nothing to do with it. You still don't think these things about yourself. And I remember when I wrote these down, and it was like the Lord said, now, Steve, I got a question for you. I said, yes, sir. Did I ever say any of this to you? You know what? That thought had never crossed my mind. It had never crossed my mind. And I said, no, Lord, never. And he said, well, Steve, why would you spend your life believing a lie, something that I never told you? Why would you choose to believe it over what I would tell you, which you've not ever even heard or accepted? Does this make sense to you? It is very serious. We've got Christians out there believing every single thing I just told you, instead of believing what God would say about them, because they haven't even heard it, because they don't have ears to hear. Why is that? Because they're believing a lie. This is bondage. This is bondage. Bondage. It's called a fortress. Right here in 2 Corinthians 10, one single thought, just one, can hold you in a captive fortress all of your life. Just one. I had more than one, but all I needed was I'm a failure. So nothing I ever did, in my estimation, was good enough. Ever. It was never good enough. There's never any freedom or victory in believing lies, ever. So it was a very embarrassing moment, for me to say, Lord, I am very sorry. I never thought about that. And it's like, well, son, I don't want you to believe the lie anymore. And I'm like, Lord, what do I do? Now, here's going to come the second part of this. This is not going to be easy. You trust me, this is not easy, because I believe these stuff all my life. So I was, goodness me, somewhere in my 30s by now, believing this stuff for 30 years. It's not going to go away just like that. Just snap, no, it's gone. No. So what you've got to do is, once you identify the lies that you've believed about yourself, you've got to then put right beside it the truth. God's truth. And what's going to make it even harder is you're then going to have to repent and say, dear Lord, I'm actually going to start believing what you said. Now, this is not pride. Okay, I'm not talking about people that just walk around and say, oh boy, I am just so handsome. I'm just so handsome. And that's full of pride. That's crap. Okay, oh, God just uses me all the time. I'm not talking about pride, okay? I'm talking about brokenness and humility, that a person would really believe the truth. So you could take every one of these things and write down the opposite, which would be what God would say. So for me, failure, what's the opposite of failure? Success. Yeah. I had to act, you know what? It was almost hard for me to get the words out of my mouth. I'm serious, embarrassingly serious. For me to say, God, God, you see me as a success? You see, this isn't pride. Oh man, no. This is like, Lord, I am so sorry. I can't hardly believe that. Now you see the seriousness of the bondage of these fortresses of one single thought. And I mean, how it has held you captive since the day you were started believing it. And I'm, Lord, I'm so sorry. So, guys, to be set free from this stuff, you're going to have to write down the thoughts you have believed. Then I want you to write down the thoughts of God. Yes. Steve, I see you as a success. I see all your potential. You are not a failure in my eyes, son. And now you're going to have to believe that. Can I tell you something? If you actually out of your mouth say you believe something, it requires you to act like it. That's a principle. Don't ever forget it. It doesn't impress me one lick for somebody to say, oh, I believe in God, and then you don't act like it. Easy to say. So if somebody says, oh, I believe, I'm like, okay, let me see. And that's actually in the Bible. Okay, if you've got faith, let me see it. Easy to say. So guys, you can't say, oh, I believe God has made me a success. God sees me as precious in his sight. You can't say that and not believe it. It don't work. You've got to believe. If you believe it, you will start acting like it. That's going to change your life. It's going to change your life because truth sets you free. So guys, this isn't my truth. This is the Lord's truth. Everything I'm showing you is in the Bible, which is why the truth will set us free. All right. Where are we at? We probably need, 45 minutes. Let's take, is it okay to take a 5-minute break here? Is somebody in control, or do I just need to keep rolling? I tell you what I'll do. I'll just keep rolling because I don't want to mess up the recording and all of that. So why don't we just, if you need to run a quick break, just go ahead. But I'm going to keep going because I'm not sure. I'm going to just go for it here. All right. The last area of consequence to a wounded spirit is going to be another what we call life cycle. And this is a life cycle of performance. So you've got one of rejection, now you've got one of performance. And this cycle of performance comes out of, again, all we've longed for is love, acceptance, and security our whole life. And so basically, what we tend to do is look and reach out to others for their acceptance. Well, what you may not realize, and so I really want you to think this through. Who have I reached out to all my life? Think about that. Who have I reached out to all of my life? For the most part, that answer is going to be a mom, a dad. And then it becomes a group of friends, a particular circle of friends. Or then it can also become a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Or then it can become a particular church or a particular missions group. But you get the point. Well, write down who you've reached out to all your life. Well, also write down the bad ones. Okay. I've reached out to Hell's Angels motorcycle group. Okay, I've got a purpose in this story. The purpose is in the story is, if you understand what I'm saying, here's the deal. Unconsciously, as you have reached out, so I'm going to repeat this 2 or 3 times. Unconsciously, as you've reached out to whoever you put down for their love and acceptance all of your life, what you never realized is that by reaching out to them for their acceptance, that you have allowed them, whoever them are, to actually mold your identity by that which they will accept in you. Let me repeat that. As you and I have reached out all of our life for others' acceptance, whoever others are, you never knew that allowed them to mold your identity by that which they will accept in you. So if I'm reaching out to Hell's Angels motorcycle gang, what have I got to become like? Them. I've got to get a motorcycle, the right kind. I got to dress like them, act like them, cuss like them, spit like them. I got to be, in order to be accepted, I got to become like them. Okay, so I chose the athletic world. Guess what? Man, I dressed like them, acted like them. I allowed them to mold my identity. Guys, if you can only take this and put God number 1, you will become like Jesus, which is the whole point of making disciples, that we would become like him. The problem is we're not looking to him for our love, acceptance, and security. Oh, hey, I'm saved. What are you talking about, Steve? I'm saved. Get off my back. I'm saved. Okay, if you're saved, it's by grace. But that's got nothing to do with the fact that you're actually looking to God for love, acceptance, and security. You could be looking to your wife for it, to your husband for it, to your children for it, to your job for it, to your pastor for it, it doesn't matter. The list is endless. And until you wake up and smell the bacon and start getting it from God, you are going to be adversely affected by it, and thus your identity. So let me run you quickly through this last cycle, and then tomorrow I'll walk you into the last step of freedom by grace. Performance cycle begins in childhood, obviously. So little child comes in the world, begins to learn that they can gain love and acceptance through performance. And we're not saying this is all bad. All right, it's normal for a mom and a dad to, oh, sweetie, that was so good. Johnny, that was so good. Okay, that's normal. Okay, what's not normal is the only time they get that affirmation of love and acceptance is through performance, that's the problem. Because then they begin to equate performance with love and acceptance, which they love. So we had a daughter, and I know what I'm telling you. And I said, Lord, how can I keep her out of this performance cycle of life? And the Lord said, son, I got a question for you. Is the only time I ever say I love you when you do something good? And I'm like, well, no. Well, then treat her like that. Incredible wisdom of the Lord. And so that's what I would do. Yeah, we would affirm her when she did good, or, good grade and good, yeah. But you know what? I would purposefully set her down in front of me. I mean, from the time she was still in diapers, right to her eyes. Daddy loves you. And she'd look around like, what did I do to get that? But nothing. And that was the whole point. And we did that her whole life. I mean, her whole life. Okay. Child begins to grow up into teenagers again in this performance cycle. Fear of failure, guys. I would say the true percentage of teenagers that struggle with fear of failure would blow our minds. Absolutely blow our minds. Most teenagers struggle with fear of failure. Why? Because they're after acceptance. What's the biggest threat to my getting acceptance? Failure. This is probably exemplified in the Asian cultures, even more so than, say, here in America or even Europe, but it's still here. But take this, just for the example's sake, we'll take Japan. Okay. In Japan, like in most Asian, you have the extended family. So, for example, if I'm a young Japanese student who is taking college entrance exams, it's a very serious thing. I'm telling you, in these cultures, very serious. You better succeed. Well, what happens if they fail? Oh my, you failed to get into university? You have not just failed to get into university. You have failed mother, father, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, dead ancestors. We're talking about Japan here. You have failed the community that we live in. You have failed the school you go to. You have failed your teachers. The enormity of that failure has produced the #1 suicide rate of teenagers in the world. This is in Japan. Guys, what I'm telling you is very serious stuff. People are performing their guts out to gain love, acceptance, and security, and they don't even know what they're doing. So in this performance cycle, the question now, and again, they're not thinking this through, as they begin to grow up into young men and women, they're going to do everything they can in their life to protect themselves, even unconsciously, from failure. Well, what is that? Unfortunately, and it doesn't work, they become very much what we would call control freaks. Control freaks. They're going to control their life to the hilt as much as they can, as much as they possibly can, to avoid potential failure. Now, a little bit of a problem here because they are not a boss unto themselves. So here comes difficulties with fixed time pressure situations. What is that? Boss comes along, son, daughter, person, sorry, here, and the boss will give you, or your DTS leader, or your IHOP leader, or your pastor will say to you, "Oh, sorry, here, I need this done by tomorrow. Bless your little heart." Well, you know what that sweet boss has just done? They have just put you in a box, which is high risk box for failure. Because if you don't do what they asked and do it by in the morning and do it acceptable, you're going to get rejection, failure. So what do? You work like crazy. Yeah, work like crazy to make everything perfect, which means I cannot fail now in the morning when I give my boss, after staying up all night, and I give my IHOP leader, and I give my DTS leader, and my base leader, and my pastor, and my work boss, and I give them what they asked for. They can't be mad at me because it's perfect. I hope this is making sense, guys, because this is a wicked way to live. You're not free at all. And this can literally lead to a life of serving, which is actually, serving is actually a very biblical thing. Jesus was called servant of all. This cycle of performance, but it leads to a life of serving out of insecurity. You're not serving out of purity, you're serving out of impurities. In other words, serving get affirmation, love, and acceptance because you ain't got it. And you're looking to the wrong person to get it. So serving becomes a duty. I hope this is making sense. Now, here's the problem. You give to the leader person what you did, and you know what? All you get maybe is, "Oh, thanks, looks good to me. I'm busy." And you're like, "What? That's it? That's it? I stayed up all night for you. I worked my fingers to the bone. I sweated. I skipped breakfast. I did this, and I give you all of this, and I and you say thank you. I'm busy." Yeah, and you're hurt. And the leader, he ain't got a clue, or she ain't got a clue. They got a clue, and you're hurt. And because you're hurt, you will react one way or the other. Typical reaction, there will be a form of withdrawal. Guys, what I have just explained to you is why so many YWAM people, okay, we'll pick on them, and church staffs. Okay, right now we'll leave IHOP out of the deal. Why so many sweet, precious YWAM people, sweets people on church staffs, it's why they leave. This right here. Oh, my pastor is very, he does no, doesn't give me anything. They're so busy. Well, my leader, you know what I did? And you know what they said? They said, "Thanks, I'm busy." Yeah, I'm gonna go find, and you will spend your life trying to find an authority figure that's going to give you the love and acceptance and security that your heart's longing for, that you don't even realize that only God can fill. And you will go to the grave like this unless you wake up, smell the bacon, and the truth sets you free. Now, you take what I've said about these periodic withdrawals and think about a marriage couple. Yeah, that's why there's 50% divorce rate. So there's constant periodic withdrawals because we're hurt. And you know what? When we withdraw, we can withdraw and get in trouble. You can withdraw to innocent things. You can withdraw to not innocent things. But what are you going to do when you withdraw? You are going to feed yourself false love substitutes. Write them down, guys. Write them down. Write them down. One of my most, unfortunately for me, false love substitutes was running. If I'm hurting and I don't even know why, other than the logical excuses, my authority figure's an idiot. That's usually the reason. I would just put on my running shoes and I would run for miles. Yeah. There's lots of incredible forms of false love substitutes. There's movies, there's the computer, there's music, there's the refrigerator, food. The lists never end. Never end. Guys, I say all of this to say, and don't throw your hands up here. Performance is not the problem. Jesus was the greatest performer the world's ever seen or ever will. Well, then what's the problem? You keep talking about performance. What's the problem? How can performance be good? It's got to do with the motive. Why did Jesus perform? There's only two choices, guys. Jesus performed because he was insecure, desperately longing for the love of Father. No. Second choice, Jesus performed because he had love of Father. That's it. That's it. Jesus loves me, this I know. Not from the neck up, for Pete's sakes. So if I know Father loves me, that sets me free to become a disciple and a great performer, because I'm not performing to get. Please hear me. Please hear me, leaders. I am not performing to get. Hear me, staff. I'm performing because I have. Now you can sit there and say, oh, boy, that's me. I have. We'll see. We'll see tomorrow. We'll see. It's easy to say. So guys, I'm going to leave you with this. We will pick up here tomorrow, because we want to see this broken. I'm serious. It's not that everything you do that you don't perform. No, I'm saying that bottom line, most of us are performing because we are looking to get, even though it be unconscious. We are not performing because we have. And I'll be able to show you the proofs of that tomorrow, so you'll be able to see clearly and recognize clearly, and hopefully walk you into this last step. And then we'll pray and trust that truly your life will never be the same, that truth will set you free. So guys, thank you. Bless your hearts for your time and patience and being willing to listen. And I appreciate you very much. And we will see you tomorrow.